On the other side of the coin is the parenting spectrum of parents who do not seem to be trying hard enough. These are the parents who are sometimes uninvolved, maybe detached a bit, and perhaps present but absent. Many times these parents have good intentions, but simply lack the right tools or margin to parent their child effectively. And they can be oblivious to what they're not doing, usually because they were never taught. Most of the time it was never their fault. And many of the parents who appear to try too little have stories of their own, stories of stress and chaotic childhoods, mental illness, stories of this unintended child standing in front of them. These parents may have their own struggles of poverty and chemical dependency and relational discord, violence. But the parent for the child may be down, being the parent for the child may be down on their list of priorities. The point here is that as we try to help a kid who's struggling with resilience, we need to go upstream into the family and into the parents to see whether they are over-parenting or under-parenting. Parents who try too hard and parents who appear to try too little may show specific patterns of responding to their child, what we know as parental responsiveness. Parental responsiveness can be healthy, it can be limited, or it can be disordered. In different ways, a parent responds to their child creates consequences, some good and some bad, some promoting resilience and some blocking resilience. And I'd like to bring parental responsiveness into the mix because it's an important dynamic to discern as you treat and teach children and work with their families. In fact, a child's attachment pattern frequently gives clues to their parents' responsiveness patterns. Now, what we like to see are parents who are attuned to their child's life situations, display appropriate empathy towards their child, and identify the child's emotions in ways that help the child to learn to modulate and express themselves. This is sensitive responsiveness, and it fosters resilience in a child because the child has, over time, through multiple experiences, been given tools with which to manage their emotions and remain regulated. They experience healthy attachment with the parent who is their emotional container. But what we frequently see are parents who display limited responsiveness. They tend to be inconsistent with their attunement and attention to the child and frequently have other priorities. They may pay attention 1 hour but then check out and withhold a response that's needed for the child because they've become involved in something else or their mind is elsewhere. Sometimes parents have limited responsiveness because of stresses or difficulties that they themselves are experiencing, and they lack the margin to empathize or consistently care for their child's relational needs. Children who live in this reality tend to develop either ambivalent or avoidant attachments to their caregivers. And kids with ambivalent attachment behave in ways including separation anxiety, resisting comfort when reunited, and demanding attention-seeking negative behaviors. Kids may show avoidant attachment when the parent shows limited responsiveness as well. In this reality, they tend to ignore the parent, engage in solitary play, and not care when the parent leaves, and little desire to re-engage when they return. But in either case of limited responsiveness, safe and secure attachment will be missing in this child, and resilience will be hindered. Finally, some parents display disordered responsiveness to their child. This happens in families where chaos and day-to-day uncertainty exist. The parent may be loving and caring one moment, angry and combative the next, sad and weepy the next, withdrawn and unresponsive the next. And typically, few of the parents' responses to their child follows any logic or is appropriate for what their child needs. These kids experience constant uncertainty, unable to predict or expect consistent and meaningful responses from their parent, and their attachment patterns will be disorganized. They may get extremely upset when their parent leaves, yet become frightened when they return. And despite being distressed, the child usually receives very little comfort when reunited. And because of this, there's little safe and secure connection with the parent, and resilience is unlikely to manifest. So we've talked about parents who are over the top and parents who try too little. Let's talk about parenting in the middle. That actually rhymes, doesn't it? What does that look like? Well, when I talk to parent groups, I spend a lot of time on what it looks like to parent in a resilient, fostering way. Working with parents who are lacking these skills and tools that will foster the formation of resilience in their child I believe it's important to have concrete and learnable concepts for them to practice and add to their parenting toolbox. So resilience training needs to be a parenting mindset, not something to assume will just happen on its own. So let's unpack what parenting in the middle looks like. First, parents need to take the time and energy to learn developmental parenting. I talk about this a lot in my behavior clinic. I tell parents it's important for you to understand that as a child grows from a newborn baby to a young adult, how you are to love, discipline, care for, and nurture your child must evolve and change to match their developmental age. For example, parenting in infancy needs to focus on attachment and trust, safety and security. Parenting in toddlers and preschoolers need to focus on effective independence. Not unbridled independence, effective independence, which means independence with appropriate boundaries and natural consequences, encouragement, and reassurance. Parenting kids who are in elementary and preteens need to focus on personal industry and self-efficacy. And in adolescence, parenting needs to primarily focus on identity formation and life readiness. And I've been in hundreds and hundreds of clinic situations where it's clear this parenting evolution has not happened. The parents are parenting their 13-year-old as if she were 3. No wonder she's acting like she's a 3-year-old. It's very hard to behave or act like a teenager when you've been parented like a preschooler. Next, to parent from the middle, moms and dads need to avoid going on their child's emotional rides. This one was a tough one for me, especially with our first child. I frequently got sucked into my child's hurt and pain and distress, but eventually learned I needed to do things differently as to not respond in a way that would make her situation worse emotionally. Tolerating your child's strong emotions is a skill most parents need to learn. And tolerate is a great way to describe it because it doesn't mean that a parent doesn't understand or empathize. They just accept that a child's emotions may get out of whack once in a while. No big deal. For parents, this means they need to remain calm and assertive, kind of like the dog whisperer Cesar Millan. And they need to avoid the child's emotional roller coaster. I tell parents, your child's emotions are not about you. So personalizing what your child is feeling is the wrong way for a parent to help. Instead, be in a place for your child to bounce off and store their emotions, like the container we talked about earlier, will give them the stability they need to start developing some resilience. Parents should think about ways to collaboratively problem solve with their child. So I suggest to parents that they schedule time with their children, each one individually, when there's an issue or problem that needs attention. The issue can be anything, like chore responsibility, expectations for allowance, getting themselves up independently on their own in the morning, doing their own laundry, or getting home before curfew. I tell parents, agree on the issue, establish clear boundaries, expectations, and consequences. Make a written contract if you need to. But one ground rule on collaborative problem solving is this: only work on 2 things at any given time. Humans cannot simultaneously learn too many things, no matter what your age or stage. And the magic of the 2 things thought process is that it tells a child you're going to have just a couple of things you're going to be working on together, and these things will eventually be achieved and mastered, and that the parent is rooting for their child's success. And learning to work on something and achieve it is a building block for resilience. The 4th thing I tell parents is to catch them being good. Many times when a child is falling behind or not thriving at life, and you've all seen this, parents develop a pattern of only finding fault with their child. I'm amazed at how many times I've met a family for the first time. I introduce myself to the child and to the parents, and then I listen to 15 straight minutes of negative from the mom or the dad. What he's failing at, all the things she doesn't do right, why he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, and where her outcome is headed. A lot of parents fall into a pattern of spending 90% of their energy and words on their child when their child is not thriving, and only 10% of their energy and words when their child is doing life well. For kids who have little resilience, this needs to completely flip. In fact, even for kids who are resilient, I encourage parents to spend 90% of their energy and words when their child is working hard, accepting of disappointment, being age appropriate, treating others with respect, and being helpful. So I like suggesting the use of positive zingers rather than negative diatribes. And then the fifth way parents can help parent from the middle is to focus on reinforcing your child's effort, not their successes. Research is very clear on this. Effort is much more important than talent, much more important than giftedness in becoming an effective person in life. Resilience can only be developed with sustained and almost habitual effort, and it's a way of life, a new mindset. So do you remember Ole and Lena, the proverbial Norwegian couple in northern Minnesota? Well, they were blessed with many children, and this is Lars. And he grew up with quite a surprising amount of resilience, despite being ugly as a toad. He had learned to take things in stride and seemed to benefit from the adversity he had had in his life. Well, the story goes that Lars met a blonde-haired young lady one summer after college at a conference for young Scandinavian yodelers. Her name was Helga, and isn't she a beauty? And they fell deeply in love. And little did Lars know that Helga's father was the richest man in all of northern Minnesota, thanks to his online freeze-dried lutefisk company. Nobody knows what lutefisk is, except back there. So she takes him home, and Lars asks her parents for her hand in marriage, and they agree. And there's this expensive, lavish wedding. And then the couple retires on their wedding night to a French chateau home on Lake Winnipesaukee for their honeymoon, a wedding gift from her wealthy father. So Helga takes Lars to the honeymoon suite and pours him a glass of 1963 Chateau Lafite Rothschild. And a minute later appears to celebrate the wedding night with her new husband. She sits beside Lars on the bed and places her hand on his knee and says, "What do you think, my darling?" And Lars looks around, pauses for a second, and says, "Well, it could be worse." So as children grow up, their brains should be marinating in messages of resilience. And this morning, I want to leave you with 5 messages that I actually have a handout and suggest to parents to say to their kids on a regular basis. The first is this: failure is not defeat, it's just failure. Children should hear this message recurrently because they need to understand the difference between failing at something and becoming defeated. You see, defeat causes a person to give up and to quit and to lose motivation. But if properly coached, kids can understand the difference between failure and defeat. Failure is to be thought of as just a speed bump in life. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. Failure is simply a part of life, and it should not be given more power than it deserves. The second message parents should say to their kids is expect failure more often than not. I know this sounds pessimistic, but it's how life works. Living life is more likely to include mistakes and failures than perfection and success. And when you know that failure is a possibility, almost an expectation, if you will, you can anticipate it and not be crushed by it. In very few days, anyone could say that their entire day was a complete success. The third message is this: effort is everything. Effort makes up for many of our deficiencies. Not all, but many. And focusing on a child to be effortful helps them understand that they have some skin in the game and helps them avoid comparing their ability to the ability of others. It gives them the message that you are you and nobody else. And it doesn't mean that just because a child puts in maximal effort, the outcome will be what they desire. Kids need to know that they can often make up the difference with effort, but also that effort does not necessarily guarantee their success. That's resilience. You're more likely to succeed when you think with an effort mindset. It's just a probability thing. Fourth, the real joy in achievement is the result of experiencing setbacks. True joy in anything comes when you know what the opposite feels like. And setbacks are what teach about this if we let them teach us. Failure, loss, disappointment, betrayal, all must be experienced to know what joy truly is. So real joy is much more an appreciation deep in your core rather than feeling happy. And then finally, your worth to me does not depend on your successes or failures. I like to tell my kids, live life fearlessly because I'm here for you. Imagine this message being spoken to a child as they journey. Spoken whether the child is succeeding or failing, whether they are on the honor roll or flunking out, whether the child makes varsity or gets cut from the team. Spoken irrespective of a child's decisions, behavior, or performance. So, all of us are in the important work of helping families one kid at a time. And as Frederick Douglass said, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And my hope is that you will leave today with some new ideas about developing skills in your patients, maybe your own children and their parents, that will help them live more resilient lives and joy-filled futures. Thank you so much.